The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Houston County Courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. In courtroom 3B, 17-year-old Jasmine Richardson sat quietly in the back row, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple navy blue blazer and a knee-length skirt, her natural hair pulled back into a neat bun. Judge Gerald Harrison's reputation preceded him in the small Texas town. Known for his strict demeanor and harsh treatment of young offenders, he had earned the nickname the Hammer among local attorneys. That morning, he seemed particularly irritated, having already sentenced 3 teenagers to defensive driving courses and maximum fines. The courtroom was busier than usual, filled with the usual mix of traffic violators, attorneys in press suits, and curious onlookers. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background, barely masking the whispered conversations and nervous shuffling of papers. Docket number 2023 TR 458, Jasmine Richardson, called out the court clerk, her voice echoing through the high-ceilinged room. Jasmine rose slowly, her movements deliberate and composed. As she walked toward the front of the courtroom, several people noticed how young she looked, her face fresh and unmade up, her eyes focused straight ahead. The clicking of her modest flats against the floor seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet space. Judge Harrison barely looked up from his papers as Jasmine approached the podium. His steel-gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses gave him an appearance of authority that he wielded like a weapon. He'd been presiding over traffic court for 15 years, and in his mind, he'd seen it all, especially when it came to teenage drivers. "Miss Richardson," he began, his voice carrying the weight of boredom and predetermined judgment, "you're here for running a red light on Mason Street on the morning of September 15th. How do you plead?" Jasmine's voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The judge leaned forward, making a show of cupping his ear. "I'm sorry, what was that? You'll need to speak up, young lady. This isn't your high school cafeteria." A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Jasmine's mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but remained silent, trusting her daughter to handle the situation. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Jasmine repeated, her voice slightly louder but still maintaining its soft, respectful tone. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, a dismissive smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Well, another teenager who thinks they know better than a traffic camera. Tell me, Ms. Richardson, what makes you so special that you believe you can ignore traffic signals?" Before Jasmine could respond, the judge continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let me guess, you were late for cheerleading practice? Or was there a sale at the mall you just couldn't miss?" More laughter echoed through the courtroom, but Jasmine remained composed. Her hands gripped the podium slightly tighter, but her face remained neutral, her eyes steady. The judge shuffled through some papers on his desk, deliberately taking his time. "I see here you have no prior violations. That's something, at least. But your apparent inability to properly communicate in a courtroom setting concerns me. Perhaps this is indicative of a larger problem with following rules and understanding responsibilities." From her seat, Dr. Richardson watched as her daughter stood firm under the judge's condescending remarks. She knew her daughter's quiet nature often led people to underestimate her, but she also knew what was coming, the moment when all those assumptions would come crashing down. Judge Harrison continued his lecture, seemingly enjoying the opportunity to make an example of the silent, seemingly timid young woman. "In my experience, young people who can't even speak up for themselves properly are often the ones who need the strongest lessons about responsibility and—" He paused mid-sentence, his eyes catching something unusual in the documents before him. There, attached to Jasmine's case file, was a letter he hadn't noticed before. His expression shifted slightly as he began to read, his eyebrows rising incrementally with each line. The courtroom remained silent, waiting for him to continue his admonishment, but something had changed in the judge's demeanor. He looked up at Jasmine again, this time really seeing her for the first time, and the smugness that had characterized his expression just moments before began to fade. What he had discovered in those papers would completely change the course of this routine traffic court hearing, but for now, Jasmine Richardson simply stood quietly, waiting for him to finish reading, knowing that sometimes silence spoke louder than words. Judge Harrison cleared his throat, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. Before him lay a letter from none other than the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, bearing the signature of the Dean of Engineering. His face, which had been painted with condescension just moments before, now showed the first signs of uncertainty. "Ms. Richardson," he began, his tone markedly different, "this letter indicates that you're currently enrolled at MIT. Is this correct?" Jasmine nodded, then remembered to speak. "Yes, Your Honor." The whispers in the courtroom grew louder. Several of the attorneys present exchanged glances, their interest piqued by this unexpected turn of events. "But you're only 17, Judge Harrison stated, more to himself than to Jasmine. He shuffled through more papers on his desk, now paying close attention to every detail he had previously glossed over. "I graduated high school 2 years early, Your Honor," Jasmine explained, her voice still soft but clear. "I'm currently a first-year student in the Department of Physics and Engineering." The judge's face reddened slightly as he continued reading. The document in his hands detailed not just Jasmine's enrollment at MIT, but her extraordinary achievements. She had scored perfect marks on both her SAT and ACT, earned national recognition in multiple science competitions, and was currently involved in groundbreaking research in quantum computing. A young attorney in the gallery leaned forward, straining to hear every word. The court clerk had stopped pretending to organize her files and was openly watching the scene unfold. "And this research project mentioned here," Judge Harrison continued, his earlier sarcasm completely evaporated. "You're saying you're the lead researcher?" "Co-lead, Your Honor," Jasmine corrected politely. "I work alongside Dr. Marcus Chen in the quantum computing laboratory. We're developing new algorithms for quantum error correction." The technical terms seemed to float over most people's heads, but the importance was clear. This was no ordinary teenage traffic offender standing before the court. From her seat, Dr. Richardson watched as the judge's demeanor transformed. She had seen this reaction countless times before, the moment when people realized they had severely underestimated her quiet daughter. Judge Harrison removed his glasses, cleaning them nervously with his handkerchief. "And the traffic violation in question, you were?" "I was returning from presenting our preliminary findings at the International Quantum Computing Conference in Austin, Your Honor," Jasmine explained. "Our research session ran late, and I was trying to make it back for an important video call with our partners at CERN in Switzerland." The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the usual shuffling of papers and creaking of chairs had ceased. All eyes were fixed on the young woman who spoke of international research conferences and CERN collaborations as casually as most teenagers discussed their weekend plans. Officer Thompson, the policeman who had issued the citation, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He remembered the morning he had pulled Jasmine over, how she had tried to explain that she was rushing to an important meeting, but he had dismissed her explanation as a typical teenage excuse. Judge Harrison glanced at the traffic camera footage in the file, then back at the letters of recommendation and academic achievements before him. The contrast between his initial assessment of Jasmine and the reality of who she was seemed to weigh heavily on him. "Ms. Richardson," he said, his voice now carrying a note of respect, "perhaps you could explain your version of events regarding the traffic signal in question?" As Jasmine began to speak about the morning in question, her voice remained soft, but grew more confident. She explained how the early morning sun had created a glare on the traffic signal, making it difficult to determine its color. She even referenced the specific angle of the sun at that time of day and its effect on light refraction through the signal's lens. The judge listened intently, occasionally nodding as she spoke. The same quiet voice he had mocked earlier now commanded the complete attention of everyone in the courtroom. The transformation was remarkable, not in Jasmine, who had remained consistent throughout, but in how others perceived her. As part 2 of this story drew to a close, it was clear that Judge Harrison's preconceptions had been shattered. The quiet black girl he had so quickly dismissed was revealing herself to be someone far different from his initial judgment. The question now hanging in the air was how he would handle this revelation, and what consequences his earlier behavior might have in the light of these new revelations. Judge Harrison shifted in his leather chair, visibly uncomfortable with the situation he had created. The same courtroom that had earlier echoed with laughter at his mocking remarks now sat in rapt attention as Jasmine Richardson continued her explanation. "Your Honor," she said, reaching into her messenger bag, I prepared a detailed analysis of the traffic signal timing at that intersection. She pulled out several neatly organized pages filled with. The judge motioned for the bailiff to bring him the documents. As he examined them, his eyebrows rose higher with each page. Jasmine had created a comprehensive study of the intersection signal patterns, complete with statistical analysis of yellow light duration and traffic flow patterns. Ms. Richardson, the judge began, his tone now completely professional, you've actually analyzed the traffic patterns at this intersection. Yes, Your Honor, Jasmine replied. After receiving the citation, I spent 3 mornings observing the intersection. I noticed that the yellow light duration is approximately 3.2 seconds, which is 0.8 seconds shorter than the Federal Highway Administration's recommended minimum for a 35 miles per hour zone. Several attorneys in the gallery began furiously taking notes. One of them, a prominent civil rights lawyer named James Martinez, was particularly interested in this revelation. Dr. Richardson watched with quiet pride as her daughter expertly navigated the situation. She remembered all those nights when young Jasmine would stay up late, studying complex mathematics far beyond her grade level, always driven by an insatiable curiosity to understand how things worked. Furthermore, Jasmine continued, pulling out another document. I've compiled data from the Texas Department of Transportation showing a 23% higher accident rate at this intersection compared to similar intersections in the county. The shortened yellow light duration appears to be a significant contributing factor. Judge Harrison removed his glasses again, but this time it wasn't out of frustration. He was clearly trying to process the transformation of what he had assumed would be a routine traffic case into something much more significant. All of this research, he said, gesturing to the papers before him. You did this in your spare time between your studies at MIT. Yes, Your Honor. I believe it's important to approach every problem systematically, whether it's quantum computing or traffic safety. The court reporter's fingers flew across her stenotype machine, capturing every word. She had been recording court proceedings for 20 years, but this was unlike anything she had witnessed before. Officer Thompson, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable, finally stood up. Your Honor, if I may speak. The judge nodded, and Thompson approached the bench. I've been monitoring this intersection for 5 years, and I'd never noticed the shorter yellow light duration. Ms. Richardson's analysis appears to be correct. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The same police officer who had issued the citation was now effectively supporting Jasmine's defense. Judge Harrison studied the young woman standing before him. Gone was any trace of his earlier condescension. Instead, there was a growing realization that his behavior had been not just inappropriate, but potentially damaging to the justice system he was sworn to uphold. Ms. Richardson, he said, leaning forward, your analysis raises serious safety concerns about this intersection, but I have to ask, why didn't you mention any of this when you first approached the bench? Jasmine's response was measured and dignified. Your Honor, I was taught that actions speak louder than words. I thought it would be more effective to present concrete evidence rather than just defend myself verbally. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom. The judge's earlier mockery of her quiet demeanor now stood in stark contrast to the methodical, professional way she had presented her case. From the gallery, James Martinez made a note to speak with Dr. Richardson after the proceedings. The implications of this case, both the traffic safety issues and the judge's initial treatment of Jasmine, could have far-reaching consequences for the community. As Part 3 drew to a close, the atmosphere in Courtroom 3B had shifted dramatically. What began as a routine traffic court session had evolved into something that would likely impact not just Jasmine's case, but the entire county's traffic safety protocols. The quiet girl who had been so quickly dismissed was proving to be not just a genius, but someone who could affect real change in her community. The judge looked down at his notes, then back at Jasmine, knowing that his next words would need to be chosen very carefully. The time had come for him to address not just the traffic violation, but his own prejudicial behavior as well. The tension in Courtroom 3B grew as Judge Harrison prepared to address both Jasmine's case and his own conduct. He removed his reading glasses and placed them carefully on the bench, a gesture that had become familiar to regular courtroom attendees as a sign of a significant moment. Ms. Richardson, he began, his voice carrying a weight of authority now tempered with respect. Your presentation today has brought to light several concerning issues. Not the least of which, he paused, meeting her steady gaze, is my own behavior at the beginning of these proceedings. The courtroom remained silent, but the air crackled with anticipation. Several of the morning's earlier defendants, who had stayed to watch the proceedings unfold, leaned forward in their seats. Before I addressed the traffic citation, the judge continued, I believe I owe you a public apology. My initial treatment of you was unprofessional, prejudiced, and beneath the dignity of this court. Jasmine stood quietly, her posture straight but not rigid, maintaining the same composed demeanor she had shown throughout the morning. Her mother, Dr. Richardson, watched with a mixture of pride and lingering anger at how her daughter had been treated. However, Judge Harrison continued, your response to that treatment has been nothing short of exemplary. Instead of reacting emotionally to my inappropriate behavior, you presented a thoroughly researched, scientifically sound analysis that not only addresses your individual case but potentially affects the safety of our entire community. James Martinez, the civil rights attorney, was now openly taking photographs of Jasmine's traffic analysis documents with his phone. The implications of her findings could affect hundreds of pending cases. Your Honor, Officer Thompson interjected, standing once again. I'd like to add something to the record. The judge nodded his permission. In light of Ms. Richardson's analysis, I ran the yellow light timing data past our traffic division this morning. They've confirmed her findings. That intersection signal timing has been incorrect for at least 8 months following the system upgrade. This revelation caused a stir in the courtroom. Several attorneys hurriedly whispered to their clients, recognizing the potential impact on other traffic cases from the same intersection. Judge Harrison held up his hand for silence. Ms. Richardson, your research may have identified a significant public safety issue, but there's something else that troubles me deeply about this case. He lifted the MIT letter again. You're not just any 17-year-old. You're a researcher working on quantum computing, presenting at international conferences, collaborating with CERN. Yet when you entered this courtroom, I saw only what I wanted to see. A quiet young black girl who I assumed had nothing important to say. Jasmine finally spoke, her voice clear and confident. Your Honor, if I may, the assumptions you made about me this morning, they're the same assumptions I face almost every day, but they don't define me. My work, my research, my contributions to science and society, these are what define me. The judge nodded slowly, visibly moved by her words. And today, you taught this court a valuable lesson about those assumptions. He straightened in his chair, assuming his most formal judicial posture. In the matter of the traffic citation issued to Jasmine Richardson, this court finds the defendant not guilty. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate review of all traffic citations issued at the intersection in question over the past 8 months. But he wasn't finished. Additionally, Ms. Richardson, I would like to request that you submit your traffic signal analysis to the County Transportation Board. Your research should be part of their upcoming safety review. Jasmine nodded her agreement, and for the first time that morning, a small smile crossed her face. The judge then addressed the entire courtroom. Let the record show that this court has witnessed not just the dismissal of a traffic citation today, but a powerful reminder about the danger of prejudgment and the importance of giving every person who enters this courtroom the respect and attention they deserve. As Part 4 concluded, the implications of the morning's events were beginning to ripple through the courtroom. What had started as a simple traffic court session had transformed into a moment of both personal and systemic reckoning. The quiet girl who had been mocked now stood as a catalyst for change, her brilliance forcing not just one judge, but an entire system to confront its biases and assumptions. The story wasn't over yet, but the shift in power dynamics was clear to everyone present. The next phase would reveal just how far-reaching the impact of this remarkable morning would become. News of what had transpired in courtroom 3B spread quickly through the Houston County Courthouse. By early afternoon, local reporters had gathered in the courthouse lobby, eager to speak with the young MIT student who had transformed a routine traffic hearing into a landmark moment. Jasmine stood with her mother near the courthouse steps, surrounded by a small crowd of attorneys and community members. James Martinez, the civil rights lawyer, approached them with his business card extended. Ms. Richardson, he said, his expression serious but enthusiastic. What you've uncovered here goes beyond a single traffic citation. We've been gathering data on disproportionate traffic enforcement in minority neighborhoods, and your analysis could be crucial evidence. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her eyes widened slightly. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I need to take this. It's my research partner from MIT." Dr. Chen's voice came through clearly on speakerphone. "Jasmine, your absence from this morning's quantum computing simulation has led to something remarkable. The delay calculation error you identified last week, it perfectly matches the traffic signal timing problem you just encountered." The small crowd around her listened in fascination as Jasmine and her professor launched into a rapid discussion about quantum timing algorithms and their potential application to traffic system optimization. Even those who couldn't follow the technical details could sense the excitement in their voices. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, Judge Harrison sat in his chambers, writing a detailed memo about the morning's events. His hands trembled slightly as he typed, fully aware that his initial behavior could have derailed what was proving to be a pivotal moment in local judicial history. The county commissioner's office had already called twice, requesting copies of Jasmine's traffic analysis. The transportation department was scrambling to review signal timings at all major intersections, and local news outlets were beginning to pick up the story. Outside, Officer Thompson approached Jasmine with an unexpected request. "Ms. Richardson," he said, removing his cap, "our department's youth outreach program hosts monthly career days at local high schools. Would you consider speaking to students about your work? Both the scientific research and," he gestured to the courthouse, "how to stand up for themselves professionally." Jasmine's mother beamed with pride as her daughter thoughtfully considered the request. Dr. Richardson remembered all the times Jasmine had been overlooked or underestimated throughout her academic career. Now, her daughter's quiet strength was being recognized as the powerful force it had always been. "I'd be happy to speak to the students," Jasmine replied, "but I'd like to propose something more substantial." She pulled out her tablet and quickly pulled up a document. "I've been working on a proposal for a STEM mentorship program, specifically targeting underrepresented students in our community." James Martinez leaned in with interest as Jasmine continued. The program would connect students with scientists and researchers, particularly focusing on practical applications of science in everyday life, like using quantum computing principles to solve local infrastructure problems. The growing crowd's attention was suddenly drawn to the courthouse entrance as Judge Harrison emerged, still in his robes. He made his way directly to where Jasmine stood. "Ms. Richardson," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I've just filed a formal recommendation with the County Board of Supervisors. They should implement your traffic signal analysis across all intersections, and I've strongly suggested they consider offering you a consulting position on their Transportation Safety Committee." Jasmine's composure briefly gave way to surprise. "Thank you, Your Honor, but I'll be returning to MIT next week to continue my research." The judge nodded. "Of course, but perhaps we could arrange for remote consultation. Your unique perspective, combining advanced theoretical physics with practical community impact, is exactly what we need." As Part 5 drew to a close, the impact of the morning's events continued to expand in unexpected ways. What had begun as a simple traffic court appearance was evolving into a catalyst for change across multiple sectors of the community. Jasmine's quiet brilliance had not only exposed technical flaws in the traffic system, but had also begun to break down long-standing barriers and assumptions. Local news cameras began arriving, and reporters gathered eagerly around the growing group on the courthouse steps. The story of the quiet genius who transformed a traffic court hearing was about to reach a much wider audience. But Jasmine remained focused on the potential for real change that this moment presented. By late afternoon, Jasmine's story had spread far beyond the courthouse walls. Local news channels interrupted their regular programming to cover what they were calling the traffic court revolution. Camera crews positioned themselves around the courthouse steps, where an impromptu press conference had formed. Sarah Chen, the lead reporter from Houston Metro News, pushed through the crowd with her microphone. "Ms. Richardson, sources tell us that MIT's quantum computing just shared their preliminary findings with the National Transportation Safety Board. The implications of her work were growing exponentially." "Yes," Jasmine answered thoughtfully. "What started as a simple traffic citation analysis has revealed patterns that could be applied to traffic systems nationwide. We're seeing a correlation between quantum computing algorithms and traffic flow optimization that nobody expected." Judge Harrison, who had remained nearby, watched in amazement as the young woman he had dismissed hours earlier now commanded attention from national media outlets. His own phone was buzzing constantly with messages from other judges across the state, all wanting to know more about the morning's events. Dr. Richardson stepped forward protectively as more reporters pressed closer. "My daughter has always approached problems differently," she explained to the cameras. When other children were playing video games, Jasmine was creating mathematical models to predict traffic patterns in her neighborhood. Inside the courthouse, the clerk's office was overwhelmed with requests for transcripts of the morning's proceedings. Law professors from nearby universities had already expressed interest in using the case as a teaching tool about bias in the justice system. Officer Thompson, still present, was engaged in a serious discussion with his superior about implementing immediate changes to traffic enforcement protocols. "Sir," he was saying into his radio, "Ms. Richardson's analysis suggests we need to review every citation from that intersection for the past 8 months. Meanwhile, James Martinez had set up an impromptu office on a courthouse bench, fielding calls from civil rights organizations across the country. The implications of Jasmine's traffic study were raising important questions about enforcement patterns in minority communities. "This is unprecedented," Martinez explained to a colleague on the phone. "We have scientific evidence that directly correlates traffic signal timing with disproportionate citations in certain neighborhoods. And it took a 17-year-old quantum computing researcher to expose it." Jasmine, maintaining her characteristic composure despite the growing chaos around her, pulled out her tablet once again. "I'd like to show you something," she said, addressing the gathered crowd. She projected a holographic display of her traffic flow analysis, the complex data visualizations hovering in the air. "These patterns," she explained, pointing to swirling streams of data, "mirror the quantum entanglement models we use in our MIT research. The connection between particle behavior and traffic flow is extraordinary." Even those who couldn't understand the technical details were mesmerized by the floating visualization. Local high school students, who had gathered to witness the excitement, recorded the demonstration on their phones, their social media posts rapidly going viral. Judge Harrison approached the display, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. "Ms. Richardson, how long have you been working on this correlation between quantum physics and traffic patterns?" "Actually, Your Honor," Jasmine replied with a slight smile, "I developed most of this analysis in the 3 hours between receiving my citation and this morning's court appearance." The crowd murmured in amazement. The judge shook his head in disbelief, remembering how he had mocked her quiet demeanor just hours earlier. As the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the courthouse steps, news helicopters circled overhead, and national media outlets began picking up the story. What had started as a simple traffic court appearance was now being hailed as a watershed moment in both traffic safety and judicial reform. Dr. Richardson watched as her daughter handled each interview with grace and precision, never losing sight of the bigger picture. The quiet girl who had been dismissed and underestimated was now commanding attention not through volume or aggression, but through the undeniable power of her intellect and character. Part 6 concluded with Jasmine's phone ringing once again, this time displaying a call from the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. The ripples from her courtroom appearance were about to become waves, and no one, not even Jasmine herself, could predict just how far they would reach. The next morning, Jasmine's story dominated national headlines. "Teen Genius Transforms Traffic Court into Scientific Breakthrough," read the front page of the Washington Post. Major networks had dispatched reporters to Houston County, turning the quiet courthouse into the center of a media storm. Inside her family's modest home, Jasmine sat at the kitchen table, calmly eating breakfast while multiple screens displayed news coverage of yesterday's events. Her mother fielded a constant stream of phone calls from universities, research institutions, and government agencies. "Jasmine," Dr. Richardson called from the living room. "The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy is on the line. They want to discuss implementing your traffic analysis system nationwide." Before Jasmine could respond, Judge Harrison appeared on the morning news, being interviewed about the previous day's events. His demeanor had completely changed from the arrogant judge of yesterday. "What happened in my courtroom was more than just a traffic case," he admitted on national television. "It was a wake-up call about the dangers of prejudice and preconceptions in our justice system. Ms. Richardson didn't just prove her innocence, she revealed systemic issues that affect communities across the country. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chen at MIT. Their quantum computing lab had received unprecedented funding offers from major tech companies interested in applying her traffic flow algorithms to artificial intelligence systems. The doorbell rang, and Officer Thompson stood outside in his dress uniform. "Ms. Richardson," he said when Jasmine opened the door, "the police chief would like to personally invite you to lead a department-wide training session on bias awareness and scientific approaches to law enforcement." As Jasmine considered the offer, James Martinez pulled up in his car, carrying stacks of legal documents. "The impact is even bigger than we thought," he announced, spreading papers across the kitchen table. 17 other counties have already requested reviews of their traffic systems using your analysis model. Dr. Richardson watched her daughter absorb all this information with the same quiet focus she'd always possessed. Even as a child, Jasmine had approached challenges with methodical determination rather than emotional reactions. "Mom," Jasmine said suddenly, looking up from the documents, "I think we need to ensure this doesn't just become a media sensation. The real work is just beginning." She pulled out her notebook and began writing rapidly. Her mother recognized this behavior. It was the same intense concentration she'd shown when solving complex equations or developing new algorithms. "The traffic signal analysis is just the beginning," Jasmine explained, her voice gaining enthusiasm. "We can apply similar quantum computing principles to other urban systems, public transportation, emergency response times, school district zoning." The television continued to buzz with commentary about the quiet genius who shocked the court, but Jasmine was already focused on the larger implications of her work. A video call came in from her MIT research team. They had been up all night, expanding on her traffic flow algorithms. The applications were proving to be far more extensive than anyone had initially realized. Judge Harrison's office called, requesting Jasmine's presence at an emergency meeting of the State Judicial Council. They wanted to develop new guidelines for court procedures, directly inspired by yesterday's events. As the morning progressed, Jasmine's living room transformed into an impromptu command center. Civil rights attorneys, traffic engineers, quantum computing experts, and community leaders gathered to discuss the implementation of her findings. Dr. Richardson observed with quiet pride as her daughter coordinated multiple conversations, her soft voice carrying authority that commanded attention without demanding it. The same qualities that Judge Harrison had mistaken for weakness were now recognized as strengths. "The most important thing," Jasmine addressed the gathered group, "is ensuring these changes create lasting impact. This isn't about one traffic court case or one intersection. It's about transforming how we approach problems in our communities." Part 7 drew to a close as Jasmine stood at her kitchen window, watching news vans line the street outside. The quiet girl who had walked into traffic court yesterday had unknowingly sparked a movement that combined scientific innovation with social justice. The quantum computing prodigy who had been mocked for her silence was now leading a revolution in how society approached its most fundamental systems. And she was doing it all with the same calm, methodical approach that had made others underestimate her in the first place. Art. 1 year later, Jasmine stood at a podium in the Grand Hall of the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. Behind her, a massive screen displayed real-time data from cities across America that had implemented her traffic optimization system. "What began in a small county courthouse has grown into something far more significant," she addressed the packed audience. "Today, we've seen a 40% reduction in traffic accidents at implemented intersections and a 35% decrease in discriminatory citations across participating jurisdictions." In the front row, Judge Harrison sat beside Dr. Richardson, both beaming with pride. The judge had become one of Jasmine's strongest advocates, traveling the country to share how his confrontation with his own biases had led to transformative change. "Our quantum computing algorithms have now been integrated into traffic systems in over 200 cities," Jasmine continued, her voice still characteristically soft, but now carrying the confidence of proven success. "But more importantly, we've shown how science can address issues of social justice and equality." The presentation screen shifted to show statistics from her nationwide STEM mentorship program, which had already helped thousands of underrepresented students pursue careers in science and technology. Many of these students were present in the audience, wearing badges that identified them as Richardson Scholars. Officer Thompson, now promoted to Chief of Community Relations, nodded appreciatively from his seat. His department had become a national model for community-oriented policing, thanks to the changes sparked by Jasmine's case. James Martinez stood at the back of the hall, watching his former client receive a standing ovation. The legal precedents established by her case had led to systematic reviews of traffic enforcement policies across the country, resulting in significant reforms. Dr. Chen from MIT appeared on the screen via video link, announcing the establishment of the Richardson Institute for Applied Quantum Solutions, a new research center dedicated to using quantum computing to solve practical community problems. Jasmine showed us that the most advanced scientific principles can be applied to everyday challenges, Dr. Chen explained. Her work has bridged the gap between theoretical physics and social progress. As Jasmine concluded her presentation, she shared one final slide, a photo of the courthouse where it all began. The image brought tears to many eyes in the audience, remembering how a quiet teenager's brilliance had transformed a moment of prejudice into a catalyst for change. 1 year ago, I walked into that courtroom feeling like my voice wouldn't be heard, she reflected. Today, we've proven that sometimes the quietest voices can create the loudest changes. The ceremony concluded with the announcement of a presidential commission on scientific approaches to social justice, with Jasmine appointed as its youngest ever member. Her mother watched from the audience, remembering the little girl who used to solve complex equations for fun, now using that same brilliant mind to reshape society. Back in Houston County, the intersection where Jasmine received her citation had been renamed Richardson Square, complete with a plaque telling her story. Local schools now included her case study in their curriculum, teaching students about the power of intellectual courage and the importance of looking beyond superficial judgments. As the audience filed out of the hall, Jasmine found a quiet moment to reflect. Her phone buzzed with messages from students in her mentorship program, sharing their own stories of triumph over prejudice and discrimination. Judge Harrison approached her one last time. "Miss Richardson," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you didn't just prove me wrong that day in court. You showed us all a better way forward." Jasmine smiled, thinking of all the young people who would no longer be judged by their appearance or demeanor, but by their capabilities and contributions. Her quiet revolution had created ripples that would continue to spread for generations to come. As the final chapter of this story drew to a close, Jasmine Richardson stood as a testament to the power of brilliant minds and determined spirits. The quiet black girl who had been mocked in traffic court had transformed that moment of injustice into a movement that combined cutting-edge science with social progress, proving that true genius knows no boundaries, and that sometimes the softest voices carry the most powerful messages. Her story would be remembered not just as a triumph over prejudice, but as a reminder that every person who walks into a courtroom, a classroom, or any other space deserves to be heard, respected, and judged solely by the content of their character and the power of their ideas.